Two men built the most haunted kids empire in Five Nights at Freddy's, but only one knew he was shaking hands with evil. Henry Emily, also known as Cassette Man, made one choice in the 1970s that locked him into decades of guilt and forced him to build a trap so final there was no walking away. Hey guys, Horror Lorekeeper here. Today we're exploring the psychological breakdown of Henry Emily. Not just what he did, but why he did it. How his mind fractured under the weight of his choices, and the calculated madness that drove him to orchestrate Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator's most elaborate trap in Five Nights at Freddy's lore. Scott Cawthon created a character study in guilt and redemption that goes beyond animatronics and jump scares. This is about a father's love twisted into obsession, on a creator's pride transformed into horror, and the moment when a good man realized he'd been building cages for children's souls. Picture Henry Emily before everything went wrong, an engineer with a childlike sense of imagination, someone who genuinely believed technology could create magic for kids. Henry wasn't just building animatronics, he was crafting dreams. Henry Emily reads like the rare kind of builder who genuinely believed his machines could create wonder, until that same wonder became a cage. Sometime in the 1970s, Henry partnered with William Afton and helped launch Fazbear Entertainment, starting with Fredbear's Family Diner. That partnership is the one choice Henry could never undo. On the surface, this seemed perfect. Two creative minds, one focused on engineering brilliance, the other handling business operations. Most readings credit Henry as the engineering backbone behind early animatronics, while William handled operations. But regardless of credit splits, the outcome is the same. Henry built the stage and William learned how to hunt on it. But here's what makes this choice so psychologically devastating. Henry was choosing a partner based on surface level compatibility, not understanding the monster lurking beneath William's businessman exterior. Henry saw a fellow dreamer, William saw an opportunity. Henry was building entertainment, William was planning hunting grounds. The division of labor reveals everything about their different mindsets. Henry poured his heart into creating these animatronics, designing every mechanism, every movement, every detail that would bring wonder to children's faces. Meanwhile, William was calculating how to weaponize Henry's creations for his own twisted purposes. Henry was the creative genius building the stage. William was the predator choosing his hunting ground. Fast forward to 1983, and we see Henry's paternal instincts kicking into overdrive. The same year as the bite of '83 that would shatter the Afton family, Henry built Security Puppet to protect Charlotte Emily, a safety system that fails in the rain because it's physically trapped and too late. This wasn't just fatherly concern, this was an engineer applying his skills to solve the one problem that mattered most to him, keeping his child safe. But technology, no matter how sophisticated, cannot account for human evil operating from within the system. William Afton had access to everything Henry built. He knew the Security Puppet's protocols. He understood exactly how to circumvent the very safety measures Henry had designed. The night Charlotte died reveals the cruel irony of Henry's situation. His daughter stood outside in the rain, locked out by other children, while the Security Puppet, Henry's technological solution to protect her, was trapped inside its gift box by weight pressing down on the lid. Charlotte jumped up and down, trying to get the puppet's attention, but by the time it freed itself, William had already murdered Henry's daughter. If you want FNAF breakdowns built like real case files, one new clue, then the psychology, subscribe. This channel doesn't recap lore, it prosecutes it. This is where Henry's psychology begins its catastrophic shift. The man who believed his engineering could solve any problem had just watched his most important creation fail at its most critical moment. His daughter died because his technology wasn't enough. His business partner, the man he trusted, had murdered his child as an act of revenge for business decisions. William's motive makes Henry's trauma even more psychologically complex. Charlotte's murder reads as targeted emotional warfare. Whether it was revenge, escalation, or pure cruelty, it's a strike designed to break Henry specifically. I can reach you through your child. William felt he'd sacrificed his family for the company only to be cut out of control, so he made Henry lose what Henry loved most. This wasn't random violence. This was calculated emotional warfare designed specifically to destroy Henry's world. The immediate aftermath shows Henry's psychological state fragmenting. Fredbear's Family Diner closed. Henry's dream project became a crime scene. In the Silver Eyes and the Fourth Closet novel continuity, Henry's grief fixates on the Ella doll, described as months of crying and bleeding into it, until it's implied a piece of him stuck to it. It's not game canon proof, but it is a clean window into Henry's psychology. Grief turning into to creation compulsion. Think about that for a moment. Henry's grief was so profound, so concentrated, that it literally brought inanimate objects to life. His tears contained enough emotional energy to cross the boundary between life and death. This isn't just depression, this is grief so intense it rewrites the laws of reality. But grief alone doesn't explain Henry's subsequent actions. What drove him toward his ultimate plan was the growing realization of what his creations had become. Charlotte's spirit possessed the security puppet. The missing children incident of 1985 resulted in more young souls trapped inside Henry's animatronics. The man who built entertainment for children was forced to watch his inventions become prisons for their spirits. The psychological weight of this realization cannot be overstated. Henry didn't just lose his daughter. He discovered that his life's work, his technological achievements, his creative legacy had become instruments of eternal torment for innocent children. Every animatronic he built with love and imagination was now a haunted cage. In the novels, Henry ultimately commits suicide, dated to July 1985 in multiple summaries, even leaving a note to his sister, framing it as permanent damage he can't live with. He built a robot specifically designed to end his life, writing a note to his sister acknowledging that he had done permanent damage to himself. The fact that an engineer, someone who builds things to serve life, created a machine specifically to destroy his own life shows how completely his worldview had inverted. But in the game continuity, Henry chose a different path. Instead of immediate suicide, he chose long-term obsession. He spent decades planning the perfect trap, understanding that simply dying wouldn't solve the problem he'd helped create. The children's souls were still trapped. William was still using Henry's technology to continue killing. Death without redemption wasn't enough. This is where Henry's psychology becomes truly fascinating from a clinical perspective. He developed what could be called creator's complex, the belief that because he built the problem, only he could solve it. But solving it required embracing the very darkness he'd accidentally enabled. To save the children, he had to think like William. To free the trapped souls, he had to create an even more elaborate trap. Henry's final plan reveals a mind operating on multiple psychological levels simultaneously. On the surface, he reopened Fazbear Entertainment and created Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place as a seemingly legitimate business. But underneath, he was designing the most sophisticated psychological and technological trap in the franchise. Henry created Lefty, literally lure, encapsulate, fuse, transport, extract, as a containment body for the puppet. That's not hero writing. That's a father building a trap for his own child's afterlife. Think about the emotional complexity of this decision. Henry had to design an animatronic that would lure, shock, and capture the spirit of his murdered child. He had to build a trap for Charlotte, knowing that freeing her soul required treating her possessed form as an enemy to be contained. The pizzeria simulator location itself was designed as a labyrinth with no exit, meant to lure every remaining haunted animatronic into one location. Henry knew that Springtrap, Molten Freddy, Scrap Baby, possessed by William's daughter Elizabeth Afton, and Lefty would eventually figure out they were being lured. But he designed the psychology of the trap to be irresistible anyway. He offered them what they craved most, a restaurant full of potential victims, knowing they couldn't resist even if they suspected a trap. Henry's final speech in the connection terminated sequence reveals the full depth of his psychological transformation. This isn't the childlike engineer from the 1970s. This is a man who has spent decades studying his enemies, understanding their psychology, learning to think like them while maintaining enough of his original self to remember why he's doing this. You have all been called here, into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. These aren't the words of a grieving father. These are the words of a master manipulator who has learned to speak the language of psychological warfare. But the most revealing part of his speech is how he addresses Charlotte. "My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms the way you lifted others into yours." Here we see the core of Henry's psychology. He's not just destroying the animatronics, he's apologizing to his daughter for failing to protect her, while simultaneously acknowledging that her protective nature is what allowed him to predict her behavior and lure her into his trap. He's using his knowledge of Charlotte's personality, her desire to help other children, as a weapon against the entity she's become. The final act of burning down the pizzeria with himself inside represents Henry's ultimate psychological resolution. He's not just committing suicide, he's choosing martyrdom. He's ensuring that his death serves a purpose, that his final act redeems his original choice to partner with William Afton. William's eternal punishment would later be depicted in Ultimate Custom Night, but Henry chose his own form of penance. But there's something even deeper happening here. One, Henry is choosing to die the same way his daughter did, trapped and helpless, while someone who should have protected her instead chose to let her suffer. By burning himself alive, Henry is experiencing Charlotte's terror and abandonment firsthand. This isn't just redemption, this is penance. The psychological complexity of Henry's character becomes even more interesting when we consider the controversial interpretations of his motivations. Some analyses suggest that Henry wasn't entirely innocent, that his business practices and decisions contributed to the conditions that allowed William's crimes to continue. In this reading, Henry's final sacrifice isn't just about saving the children, it's about accepting responsibility for enabling the system that trapped them. This interpretation adds layers to Henry's psychology. Instead of a pure victim seeking justice, he becomes a man grappling with his own complicity in a horrific system. His decades of planning aren't just about redemption, they're about accepting that he bears partial responsibility for every child who died after Charlotte, because his technology and his business partnership with William made those deaths possible. The connection-terminated speech takes on new meaning through this lens. When Henry says, "Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, old friend," he's not just condemning William, he's speaking to someone he still on some level considers a friend, because they were partners in creating this nightmare. Henry's choice to partner with William Afton wasn't just a business decision, it was a character judgment that proved catastrophically wrong. Every subsequent tragedy stems from Henry's inability to see the evil in someone he trusted. Charlotte's death, the missing children incident, decades of haunted animatronics terrorizing innocent people. All of it traces back to that one moment when Henry looked at William Afton and saw a partner instead of a predator. This is what makes Henry's story so psychologically compelling. He's not a hero or a villain. He's a man living with the consequences of one terrible choice, spending the rest of his existence trying to fix what that choice broke. His final plan isn't revenge. It's an attempt to undo the damage caused by his original failure of judgment. In the end, Henry Emily represents something rarely seen in horror, a character who chooses conscious sacrifice over unconscious guilt. Rather than live forever with the knowledge that his choices enabled unspeakable evil, he chooses to die, ensuring that evil dies with him. His last words aren't threats or boasts, they're an apology to his daughter, and a promise that her suffering will finally end. The one choice Henry could never undo was trusting William Afton. But his final choice, to burn everything down, including himself, to free the children's souls, proves that even irreversible mistakes can be redeemed through conscious sacrifice. Henry couldn't save his daughter from William's evil, but he could ensure that no other children would suffer the same fate. That's the tragedy and the triumph of Henry Emily. He made one choice that damned generations of children to supernatural imprisonment, and then he made another choice that freed them all at the cost of his own life. In the end, the engineer who accidentally built cages for souls chose to die opening every door. Your call. What was Henry's one unforgivable mistake? Trusting William, or believing systems could contain evil? And comment one choice. And if you want the follow-up case file on Henry's trap design and why it psychologically had to include him, comment next case.